So I have a few introductory notes, which I hope you allow me to say. And according to the protocol, interim President Binin for the next 32 days. Consul General Stormeyer, on my left. Our speaker, Manuel Trajtenberg, distinguished guest. I'm Eli Reches, and I'm the director of the Israel Innovation Project at Northwestern. And I would like to warmly welcome you all to this special breakfast event. So we are honored to host such a diverse and distinguished group of guests today, representing Northwestern faculty, senior leadership, the Israeli consulate, major Chicago Jewish organizations, including JUF, ADL, AJC. I hope I didn't omit any Jewish organization, because then I'm in trouble, but if so, Simon Wiesenthal, thank you. Religious leadership, members of the city's prominent think tanks, notably Chicago Council on Global Affairs. We have a nice representation of the council, and I'm very happy to welcome you, and I hope that this would be a new chapter in our relationship. And leading figures from the business and entrepreneurship community. A word about the Israel Innovation Project. It's an interdisciplinary initiative focused on advancing technological, scientific, and academic partnership between Northwestern and leading Israeli universities. You can learn more about what we do and our mission from this little brochure that was supposed to be on your or next to you on the chair. So I wouldn't elaborate on that. Page 2. So a key pillar of our initiative is bringing foremost Israeli scholars to teach, lecture, and share profound insights of Israeli academia with both Northwestern and the broader Chicago community. Our speaker today, Professor Manuel Trajtenberg. Now, I have to say, I don't know how many of you speak Yiddish. The word Trachen in Yiddish means to think. And he's Mr. Trajtenberg. So, well, you understand. He's been previously a guest of Northwestern, spending several weeks with us as a scholar in residence. And he's back with us this week for a very special occasion, as a featured participant in the conference organized in honor of Professor Yoel Mokir of Northwestern Economic Department, who was recently named as a Nobel Prize laureate. Joel, I know you might kill me for putting you on the spot, but please wave your hand or stand up so that we can all formally congratulate you on this immense, towering achievement. That's all yours. As we gather today, we do so at a critical moment. I want to show you page 3, yes. I'm almost done. 5 more pages and it's done. Don't worry, Manuel, you're good. So I want to share with you a thought of mine that bothers me. We are living through a profound shift in the global landscape and the Jewish world. A movement that I liken to tectonic plates that leaves us caught between the nostalgic loss of Stefan Zweig's book, The World of Yesterday, and the chilling anxieties of Orwell's 1984. Over the past 2 years and a half, Israel has faced an unprecedented existential crisis, fractured internally by a fierce battle over its democratic and religious identity, while simultaneously engulfed in a devastating external warfare. To help us navigate these complex and pressing questions, we could not think of a better qualified speaker than Professor Manuel Trajtenberg. Manuel is a globally renowned expert in the economics of innovation, R&D, and economic growth. With a distinguished career spanning academia, public policy, and national security. Page 4, the last one. I think. He's a professor emeritus of economics at Tel Aviv University and earned his PhD from Harvard University. Throughout his career, he has held several of Israel's highest public sector advisory roles, most notably as a founder and first chairman of the National Economic Council at the Prime Minister's Office, chairman of the Council of Higher Education. He's also a former member of the Knesset. I don't know how big an honor it is, but it's in your bio, I have to mention this. And recently, more seriously, served as the executive director of the Institute for National Security Studies, INSS, uniquely bridging the gap between national economic resilience and geopolitical strategy. So before I hand the microphone to Manuel, I want to express my deepest gratitude to our program, to the Israel Innovation Program, Strategic Operation Manager, Ms. Crystal Fatcaro-Hips. Crystal. As well as to the wonderful team who helped her produce this flawless event until now. Yanka Piper and Lou Zhang. I don't know where you are, but oh, you are. So now, please join me in welcoming Professor Manuel Trajtenberg.
Good morning to you all. I'm delighted to be here, truly so. I'm very grateful for all of you coming. It's not obvious. I think that what brings many of you, if not all, to this occasion is that there is a profound concern for what's happening in Israel, in the region, and the desire to understand better, perhaps, what's going on in these turbulent times. I want to thank Ellie very much and Crystal for organizing this. I want to thank Joel for getting the Nobel. He did it just for this event to take place. I mean, that's it, right? Joel, you didn't want the Nobel, but it came about. I've been very fortunate to be a friend with Joel for, I don't know, 30-something years. So what I intend to do in the short time we have at our disposal, I've been told to be brief, which I always find very difficult, but I will do my best. Let me take out my watch. I would attempt to do in half an hour and then open it up to Q&As, is to give you a sort of a sense of what's happening within Israel. I'm not going to talk about the war. I have lots to say about it, and if there are questions about it, I will, of course, answer them, but I want to really zoom in into Israel, its society, its economy, what's happening to us, okay, vis-a-vis these dramatic events. Now, the starting point is to understand that what we are going through didn't start on October 7th, 2023. It started actually 7 years prior to this date. What happened 7 years ago? You can't remember. Well, let me remind you, in April, so it's a bit more than 7 years, in April 2019, we held the first round of elections of 5 consecutive elections that took place over 4 years. That was incredibly destabilizing. I mean, we used to think that that's only in Italy in the 70s that happens, okay? No, it happens to us. Inconclusive, very divisive elections. So that's the starting point. point. We didn't know at the time, okay? And then in the middle of that, we had COVID. Well, at long last, something that is not made in Israel that affects the whole world. Okay, small consolation. But COVID, as you know, was also a very divisive issue, the way you handle it, the policies and so forth, also in Israel. Okay, which groups of the population didn't agree to the restrictions and so forth. So that came in the middle. I mean, the elections were held at the same time, okay, as we were struggling with this epidemic, okay? And then, I'm sure you have forgotten of that, in May 2021, we had a confrontation, yet another one, with Gaza, with Hamas, but this time, Israeli Arabs erupted in riots within Israel, not the Palestinians in the territories, in Ramla and Lod and Haifa and Akko. That was the first very dramatic one for us, very traumatic, okay? So you see, we are in May 2021, elections are still going on, we were barely after the COVID, and then in January 2023, a new government takes power, the same one that is today governing the country, and they launch immediately the so-called judicial reform. In Israel, we cannot even agree about the terminology, right? They call it judicial reform. For many of us, it was like a coup against democratic institutions. And immediately, social protest erupts, but to an extent that nobody had foreseen. I mean, we started to have demonstrations every Saturday evening, and then during the week, and more, and they were growing all along. And what's not less important is who participated in these demonstrations, not just the oldies like myself, okay, but also young people that prior to that, we thought that we were out of the game, okay? And this intensified and kept going on and on and on until, of course, October 7th. And since then, we have been in a war. Yes, we are still in war. I mean, these very last days, right? We are being attacked by drones, explosive drones from Lebanon and so forth. And of course, there is huge uncertainty vis-a-vis Iran. This is not the end, okay? And this has been going on for more than 2.5 years. Let me say the following. Never in any scenario that was rehearsed by the military establishment, the security establishment in Israel, we considered the possibility of a war lasting more than a few weeks. That was the most pessimistic scenario, was a few weeks. And there we are, 2.5 years, in a war that essentially involved 7 different fronts. Each one of these events, of these processes, has hit us very badly. The conjunction of all of them is really extremely hard to cope with. And so when you think of Israeli society right now, think of this, okay? Don't think about just October 7th. Don't think just about the politics. It's much more than that. But that's not all. As we heard before, Eli said, on top of that, there is an unprecedented global upheaval, and we are in the midst of it all, right? In the geopolitical area, in economics, in technological. Right now, by the way, AI is causing lots of firings of young workers in high tech in Israel. These very last days, okay, companies and startups that we thought they were immune to it, no. There are dismissals and so forth. I mean, the disruption of the labor market is huge because Israel is so immersed into high technology, then the AI is even more of a disruptor in those sectors. Trade wars. I mean, Israel is intimately connected to the rest of the world, okay? Essentially, the whole of the high-tech industry is export-oriented. So when there are trade wars, okay, between the US and other countries, it affects us directly, not indirectly. And of course, the great power confrontation and the weakening of democracy. So all of this is affecting us big time. So superimpose that on what I described before. That's what we're going through day in and day out. How you cope with that? How is society in general, doesn't matter Israel or not, how do you cope with that? Well, essentially you have to rely on the sources of internal strength. Okay, what are these sources for any society? Social cohesion and resilience, economic strength, political stability, healthy democracy, scientific and technological prowess. Do we have these strengths? To what extent do we have them to be able to cope with all of that? I'm not going to refer to scientific and technological strength. I will be very happy to address any questions. I'm very involved. I've been very involved with these fields in Israel. I'm not going to talk about democracy unless you ask me. I took it out from the presentation because I was told it's too long. But again, I will be happy to refer to that. I'm going to concentrate on the first three. Okay, so that's kind of the agenda for now. I forgot to turn off my phone. 1 second. Let's start with with what's happening within society. What is social cohesion and resilience? Let's define that. And we use these terms interchangeably. They are very different. By social cohesion, we mean a sense of belonging, the glue essentially enabling cooperation, trust, and the pursuit of common goals. What do we mean by social resilience? Well, that's the extent to which a society can cope with shocks, with crises, okay? Not only cope in that moment, but maintain functionality and recovery. That's very much part of what resilience means. They're not the same. We may think that one is the sine qua non for the other. Let's look at it. Israel, as in many other things, is a paradox. Why? Resilience, yes. Social cohesion, no way. And so there is a big question here. What the hell is going on? Okay? How come that we have proven to be resilient, okay, to be able to cope, to be able to function, and to start recovering, and yet you cannot say that Israeli society has, okay, a significant degree of social cohesion. So let me address that. It's important to try to understand that paradox. So why the lack of cohesion? First of all, there are objective factors. Israel is an incredibly heterogeneous society. You say, yeah, well, sure. Any society is heterogeneous. I mean, look at the US, look at whatever. Okay? Well, the difference is that in Israel, the heterogeneity is multidimensional. And let me just kind of speak about some of the dimensions of heterogeneity. First of all, of course, Jewish, non-Jewish. 21% of the population in Israel is not Jewish, right? And I'm counting only within the traditional borders. When I say Israel, that's for me, Israel. The non-Jewish population is not by no means homogeneous. It's very heterogeneous. So Muslims, Christians, Druze, Muslims, they're not homogeneous. I mean, there are the Bedouins of the south, which are very different from the Bedouins of the north, which are very different from the rest, and so forth and so on. And these differences count in a very real sense. Take the Druze. The Druze serve in the army, big time serve in the army. You know, the town in Israel with the highest proportion of soldier casualties to population is Bet Jan, okay, a Druze village in the north. And they're very proud of that, okay? And then among the Jews, the Haredim, non-Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, non-ultra-Orthodox, by the way, among the Haredim, huge differences. You know, the Litaim, the Hasidim, the Sephardim among them and so forth, and these differences play out. They play out in politics, they play out in education and so forth. It's not just a theoretical difference between them. Among the non-Haredim, the secular, the traditional, the religious, again, each one of these categories is not homogeneous at all, okay? And then there is this Sephardic Ashkenazi. We thought 20 years ago that was gone. You know, my daughters don't understand, you know, what the hell do we mean by that? I mean, and some of them have proven that with the ones they chose to marry with. I'm very happy with it. But it has come back to play a role, very much, you know, induced by political convenience. But it is there, more now than 20 years ago. The periphery, you know that concept. You drive an hour and a half, if there is no traffic. And that's the periphery, very different from the center, okay? Native-born and immigrants, that's still an issue. And among the immigrants, Russians, I mean, from the previous Soviet Union, okay, and by the way, don't dare to confuse Ukrainians from Russians. These days, a big issue within Israel, okay, and so forth. The two sides of the green line, I didn't have a better way of expressing it without offending somebody. So you know what I mean, okay, again, big issue. And then there are the socioeconomic gaps. Sure, you know, that's in any country. But that's kind of, you know, it's there. But look at all the rest. And even the high-tech sector became a class in itself, very distinct in culture even, from the non-tech sector. So I enumerated here 10 dimensions. No, there are many more within each of them. That's huge heterogeneity. That's very different from most countries we're aware of, where you can summarize the heterogeneity in 3-4 dimensions. And the point is that these dimensions, they create or they fuel, okay, social fragmentation and political polarization. It doesn't have to be that way. But that's what has happened, in part, or to a large extent, because some politicians in Israel, okay, they cultivated these differences and translated them into political difference. It could be otherwise. And I emphasize that because that's part of the role that falls upon us, to try to turn this diversity into a source of strength, not of fragmentation and polarization. But in spite of the lack of cohesion, I said, let me continue with that. I mean, we don't have a collective vision in Israel. The good old Zionism that I presume that all of you were nurtured into it, okay? The good old Zionism that made me move to Israel when I was a teenager. You know, I was 16 years old, okay? That Zionism is not longer a factor unifying the country. We need to define Zionism 2.0, okay? And that still remains a very elusive task for us. You know, President Rivlin, he gave a very famous speech in the Knesset where he talked about the tribes, okay? That Israel is made up of tribes. I was then, I confess, a member of the Knesset, and I heard that speech, and really, I knew in real time that it was an important speech, very different from 99% of the speeches you hear in the Knesset, typically. And people remember his definition of the 4 tribes, but they don't remember what he said immediately after. That there is no tribe that feels itself as a majority, and therefore each tribe is defensive because it feels threatened by the others. And when that's the case, then it's very hard to define a common ground because I'm suspicious of the others, each one, okay, rather than being one that feels itself and is perceived as being dominant, okay? In Israel, there is a lack of common public space, what I call agora, right? The Greek term. The army, the service in the IDF used to be that place, not for all. Okay, the Haredim, only back, before 77, quite a few of them participated, but not afterwards. Okay, but take them away for a moment, okay? The army used to be that. These days, the army itself is experiencing those divisions. And I could elaborate, but not. And then there is the education system in Israel. And that's a topic that makes me incredibly mad, because the state of Israel, okay, he has essentially created a divided educational system supported by the state. There is not one system. There is one for the religious, one for the Haredim, actually a few for the Haredim, okay? There is one for the Arabs, there is one for the others, not elsewhere classified, if you wish, that was supposed to be the dominant one, but now it has become defensive in itself, okay? What do you expect to happen if the children don't get to know the other types of children from kindergarten on? So this is really one of the sources of our troubles, because the educational system creates day in and day out, okay, these divisions that never meet something different from somebody different from them. In the army, as I said, has become problematic. Then when? Okay, when you reach the age to enter the labor force, you are already full grown, okay, with your values, your perceptions, etc., etc. And yet there is social resilience. How come? Well, I don't have a very good explanation for that, to tell you the truth, but I will say the obvious, which is that the existential threats that we have been exposed to, not only the external ones, but the internal as well, as I said, with the judicial reform and so forth, that created mobilization. That, created the sense of, hey, we are all in the same boat, and this boat is, sinking. So we need to do something, all of us, okay, to keep it afloat, okay? It generated a renewed sense of identification, civil mobilization. The civil mobilization that has been happening in Israel is truly extraordinary. I'm privileged to be, in a position to meet lots of good people that come to me for advice or to get involved into this, into that. And it's extraordinary the same kind of entrepreneurship that you see in high tech, you see also in the civic arena, of trying to do something about it because the government cannot be trusted, etc. Voluntarism and so forth. It awoke the younger generation. We used to think, and rightly so, that our youngsters, the only thing they care about is to, quickly start, create a startup, do an exit, get rich, and have the good life. I mean, that was kind of, essentially, that was the common aspiration. You see now these young people, not all of them, but many of them, deeply concerned and involved and so forth. Very recently, I don't know whether you know that, the channel 13 on TV, there are a few channels, was on the brink of collapse, economic collapse, okay? That channel is on our side, okay? And some entrepreneurs, very young, that did a huge exit recently, they essentially put up the money to keep this channel running, okay? That's the first time ever that Israelis, young, very young Israelis, I'm talking about these guys are 30-something years old, okay? Do something, which is they commit themselves to save an organ of communication, okay, that a media organ that is considered to be very important to preserve democracy. Okay, that's kind of the commitment, okay? And of course, we were not aware of that. But resilience is not created overnight. Something was happening along these other nefastous processes, okay? Something good was happening on the side, and it came out. And essentially what we see in Israel is both the forces, if you wish, the negative ones and the positive ones, okay, playing out big time, okay? The political dimension will be very brief. From the creation of the state up to 2018, we had 20 elections in 70 years, every 3.5 years. Great, that's normal, okay? 4 years, okay, 5 election campaigns, on average every 10 months. And this number should give us pause. There are a total of 120 members of the Knesset. It's a very small. We had, over these years, 150 new, okay, members of the Knesset. It took me like half a year to understand what's going on in the Knesset when I was a member of the Knesset, and I thought I knew because I was very connected to government and so forth. We have had 3 prime ministers, 4 finance ministers, 5 defense ministers, 6 foreign ministers. So next time in the Seder of Pesach, you say, Echad mi yodea, okay, you can recite that, okay? That's it. I hope it doesn't continue on, 7 and 8, okay? And that was accompanied by radicalization, the entry of extremist parties. This is one of the phenomena that is devastating. I mean, the fact that Ben Gvir, okay, not only he's a minister, but he was allowed to enter and play a central role in politics, is really a disgrace. It doesn't matter whether you are on the right or on the left. That person who is, has committed many felonies, okay, should not be in the political body and polarization. This, I will go quickly over that. But it's not only that. At the time of Ben-Gurion and Eshkol, there were 16 ministers in the Israeli government. Under Netanyahu, 30 to 38. Ministries, okay? 31 now, the average for OECD countries, 15, okay? We have had, since 2020, 76 changes in the structure of government, meaning moving around ministries and functions and so forth. It's a disaster for the functioning of the government. You cannot function that way. You need some measure of institutional stability. Economics, that's fun. So let me start with what was happening at the macro level the day before October 7th, okay? We were incredibly lucky. It's not luck, but nevertheless. Why? Because the economy was doing very well prior to this war. This is the numbers that easy to remember, okay, in terms of our, the GDP per capita in terms of purchasing power before the war, okay, was about $54,000 per capita. Now it's 60-something, depends how you measure it. And we were in the middle of the OECD countries. There are 38 OECD countries. Very, respectable place. We had very strong macro fundamentals. A low GDP, debt to GDP ratio, that's a crucial indicator, about 60%. Very large foreign currency reserves, about $200 billion. That's about 40% of GDP. Financial stability, low budget deficit, very low unemployment. These are the starting conditions before the war erupts, okay? But we should not forget that at the same time, and this is another paradox that we see in Israel, there was social failure in Israel. We had, and we still have, a high cost of living, a housing crisis, deficient social services, okay? So you have this duality, okay, as very strong macro performance, incredibly important, particularly if you get into a war, okay? But at the same time, that strong macro fundamentals were not translated into economy-wide or society-wide prosperity, okay? I won't dwell on it, but we had a long march from the beginning of this century to get down the debt to GDP ratio. This is a great success compared to the OECD. You see, we were very bad then. We are in a very good situation. Well, right now it's going up, but up to the war, okay? The foreign reserves, there were, as I said, 200 billion, okay, and they kept rolling up. Okay, let's talk about the economic impact of the war. Typically, when you ask an economist in Israel, what are the costs of the war, he or she immediately will refer to the budgetary costs. Nope. The main cost, the main price, the main burden of the war is the loss of precious human capital. Israel rests on one, not two, one incredibly important resource, our brains. Yes, we have gas. We're going to run out of gas at some point. We were doing well before the gas. And it's okay to have it. I'm happy with it. But what we have still is human capital. Human capital, people have suffered, okay? And we have lost a lot. These are numbers, you can find them at the INSS, okay? Look at this number. Recognized as victims of hostilities since the beginning of the war, 80,000 people, okay? The wounded, okay, 20,000. Casualties, according to a different definition, close to 40,000. These are macro numbers. And these numbers don't include those that were displaced by the war from the next to Gaza, from the north, okay, which are tens of thousands of people. Who are these casualties? Who serves in the army? Is really the best of the best, okay, that do that. Also in terms of age distribution and so forth. And you're talking about, for example, the reservists. The reservists in Israel have been serving, some of them 400 days, 500 days. These are people that have jobs, they have families, okay? So the disruption is huge. The cost for them is huge. The damage to education, training, and scientific research at the universities. We gave all sorts of exemptions to students serving in the army, but the exception, the grades, don't make up for the loss in studying, okay? So there's a real loss in human capital here that cannot be made up, okay? And what we call relocation, okay? We know that many are choosing to spend more time abroad or we don't know how many are going to come back. All in all counted, the reduction in actual employment due to the war as a percentage of the labor force around 5%. That's macro, okay? But it goes beyond that. The damage to Israel's brand, the startup nation. I used to go abroad for many different capacities. And, I was so proud of representing Israel and the Israeli economy. How do you do it? What's the secret sauce? And now we have to be careful when we go abroad. Okay, the structural physical capital, regional damage, and so forth. If we count everything, has been done by the Bank of Israel. If you count all the losses in that sense, you get to a 8.5% of GDP lost since October 23 because of the war. That's a very large number. But let's talk about the budget for a moment. Okay, of course, the huge impact is on the defense budget. The defense budget essentially, grosso modo, doubled, okay? And if you look at in terms of GDP, which is more important, okay, in 22, we have gone down gradually to 4.2% of GDP. That's okay. I mean, it's not the OECD with 1.8, but the OECD, the European countries now are increasing defense spending, okay? That's not sustainable, a number like that. It jumped to 5.5. Now we're talking about 8% of our GDP going to defense. And the question is, what will happen in the near future? What will happen in the next few years? Will that percentage remain as high or go down gradually? If you look at other expenses, we're talking about something like $120 billion, the budgetary costs of the war. And that means that taxes had already gone up a bit, not much, because this government is very clever in postponing the pain. Okay, sure. 5 minutes, I don't have much to say. Less investment, lower growth. The debt has gone up already to 69% and rising, okay? And the danger of another lost decade. Now, and yet, another paradox. And yet, when you look at the macro indicators, if you don't know what's happening, you wouldn't believe that there has been a war, okay? You look at the stock market is at a record high, the strongest shekel ever, I mean 2.87, I think, Effie, you know, what, something like that. I don't follow, because for me it's great. I come here, everything is cheap. The foreign current reserves are up to 230 billion. Unemployment is at a record low, rising real wages, large exits. We had the largest ever, okay, at the tune of $35 billion. This company Wix that was acquired by Google, okay? We have a record number of billionaires. I mean, imagine that. I mean, it's 52 billionaires in dollars, okay? Who are they, these people? I mean, I don't know any of them for some reason. My daughters don't know any of them. So how come? I mean, how is it possible? I don't have a good answer to this, I must say. The jury's out, okay? And we are still trying to understand. But let me mention a few things. I said before, we had excellent economic conditions prior to the war. We're still kind of riding that. We have still support from the US and the Jewish communities. I mean, a lot of money has been going into the country, okay? And then the business sector in Israel is really phenomenal, particularly the high tech, in terms of adaptability, in terms of being able, ingenuity, the way they try to kind of bypass the limitations of the war is really stunning, okay? And the high tech, in spite of the shock of AI and so forth, is doing really, really well, okay? But we have not yet fully confronted the true cost of the war. So I'm not, when I see the hoopla about the good macroeconomics and so forth, I say, hey, you ain't seen nothing yet, okay? In terms of the indebtedness and so forth, the long-term consequence of human capital losses, and what I call the human overdraft. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is take a typical family, okay? In the mid-30s, husband and wife, both of them work, 3 children, that's a typical Israeli family. He or she are serving hundreds of days as reservist. Okay, the other spouse has to keep up the business, the children, the household going. We are not super women or supermen. That takes a toll, okay? And it's a toll that, it's being there for 2.5 years. So, you see, that human overdraft is going to drag on, okay, and unfortunately play a role in the future. But nevertheless, okay, I wouldn't let you feel depressed by this. No way. So I said before, we are leaving behind 7 bad years, and I truly believe that we can bring about the 7 good years. Now, in the story in the Bible, with Joseph and the Pharaoh, it's the other way around, right? First come the 7 good years, then they save, and then the 7 bad years. But because we have copyrights of the Bible, we can turn it around, right? Nobody can sue us for us, right? So in this case, we are going to leave behind the 7 bad years, and we could bring the 7 good years. There are some favorable indications. First, in spite of all, the actual security threats have diminished. It's very hard for Israelis to say, what? But look at what's happened. Yes, but nevertheless, these 2.5 years have degraded in a big way, okay, the capabilities of our enemies. Syria has changed completely and so forth. We have proven that we have social and economic resilience, civic mobilizations, and there is this sentiment. People talk all the time about the fact that we have to rebuild. I mean, that's kind of the talk of the day in Israel. Livnot mechadash. Rebuild. Build anew, actually. Not rebuild. Build anew. Okay? That's the sentiment. And there are opportunities, build back better, the northern and southern region. Okay? Be fast in adopting AI in business and government. People are talking about that. A surge in defense industry, and with the ultra-Orthodox. Yes, at this point we are in a big confrontation with them. But they are going to be, there is no brera, as we say in Hebrew. Okay, they don't have a chance other than integrating themselves. And then it's as if all of a sudden you had a reserve, okay, army of unemployed, okay, that you could integrate into the labor force. And there are also geopolitical opportunities to expand the Abraham Accords, the India, Middle East, European corridor. We are still working on that. It's not dead, okay? And even in Latin America, there are new opportunities. For that to happen, we need first and foremost, okay, a big political turnabout in the coming elections. I mean, this is decisive. I cannot overemphasize that. There is the expectation of a new beginning that can happen, okay, if we have this turnabout in the coming elections. We need to restore hope and trust, rebuild the common sense of purpose. That's what we need, okay? That in spite of all of that, Israel 2.0 will come about, okay? We need to turn military gains into diplomatic achievements and to offer a political horizon to the Palestinians. These are essential elements. And of course, new national priorities. Yes, we can I must tell you, I'm convinced we must, we can, and we will bring about the 7 good years. Thank you very much.